Earth was very different from the life on Earth today. There was much space on the land, few people to occupy that space, and we remembered. We remembered the true nature, the compassion of our lives. We remembered the gift of this world and the beauty within this world, the gift that we've come to call life. And then something began to happen. Our lives changed as the memory of that gift began to fade. Feeling separate from the very world that we had come to experience, we began to build machines, extensions of ourselves, external technology, to explore that world and once again remember. Deep into the quantum world of the subatom we have traveled. Deep into the furthest reaches of interstellar space, we probe, sending machines, surrogates of our perceptions, to explore. And now a mystery unfolds as our own science seeks the memory of ourselves, moving into the farthest reaches of space, plunging deep into the quantum world of reality. We find that there is a force. There's a force that eludes explanation. Scientists see this as a field that cannot be measured, a field that defies engineering. They call this an intelligence. That force, that field, that intelligence that binds all in its creation, the ancients called spirit. All of the data, all of the measurements, all of the information point back to you and I, asking us to remember, asking us to once again know the mystery within. Collectively, as we approach this time in history that the ancients called the shift of the ages, our own science is directing us back to ourselves, back to the very nature of our being, back to what is very possibly the single most sophisticated technology ever to have graced this world with its presence. It's the mystery of you and I, the mystery of life. Through this mysterious force, expressing as our lives, once again we will know ourselves, and in that knowing, once again, you and I will remember. As I began putting this presentation together, it was so clear to me through my life experience and my life path that compassion would play such a key role in the unfolding of this information. Through my life experience, 2 near-death experiences in 1959, leading to a series of synchronistic experiences, sacred journeys all over the world, culminating in Mount Sinai in 1986 and early 1987. Compassion became to me the key to the graceful transition that we are asking ourselves to allow as we live these days of the shift of the ages. The ancients called the shift of the ages. In looking for an image that to me conveys the feeling of compassion, I came across this image, the image of Archangel Michael from an artist, a very good friend of mine, Cheryl Yonbach Rose. She lives in the Mount Shasta area. She created this image the evening that the United States began bombing in the Gulf War. She went to bed that evening after turning off the television and seeing that we had, in fact, begun the bombing. And this vision came to Cheryl. It's a vision of Archangel Michael enveloping the earth in the power of his presence. And as you can see, he is in prayer over a very specific portion of the earth. This is over the Middle East where the conflict was occurring. And the entire earth is suspended over this cup, the chalice cup of Christ, the cup of transformation. And Cheryl had a prayer that came with a vision that evening. And to me, her prayer embodies the science of compassion. Her prayer was this: that no one would ever win this conflict, that no one would win this war, that there were no rights and no wrongs, that somehow the entire experience would be transformed into something greater in its outcome than it was in the components of its beginning. Well, you and I know that the history books will show that the United States won the war in the Gulf, and it remains to be seen, I believe, as to whether or not anything was really won or not. I will use this image often to convey to you, for me, the epitome of the science of compassion the recognizing of the nature of the conflict and the allowing of the experience. Within our modern culture, the 20th century idiom, our scientists are seeing events, unprecedented events, events that we have no reference points for at all, unfold before our eyes. We're seeing them on our Earth. We're seeing them far out beyond our Earth into interstellar space that surrounds our Earth. For example, in 1991, this is an image of the Milky Way galaxy, a spiral galaxy that we live in. Because we live within the Milky Way, we can actually photograph the actual Milky Way. This is a simulation of a similar galaxy. In the center of our Milky Way, the great central sun, as the ancients called it, there is a mysterious radiant source of information. Well, in 1991, scientists began to notice a new frequency, a new wavelength, a new band of light radiating, triggering from the center of this Milky Way, bathing the stars and the suns and the planets in a new light that had never been experienced before. What does this light mean? Why did it happen, and why is it happening now? As we look into our solar system, and you don't have to look very far, really, to see that our scientists and our researchers are spending a tremendous amount of time and money exploring throughout our solar system with the probes, the Magellan probe, that mapped over 90% of the surface of Venus. The Ulysses probe we'll speak about in just a minute, that is exploring the surface of the sun. The probe's Voyager that has traveled far beyond the edges, the outer reaches of our solar system. All these probes, the Viking probes in 1976, went to find life on Mars, biological life, never expecting to find archaeological evidence over 500,000 years old. Well, this information, this kind of information, our scientists have access to this information. There appears to be a discontinuity, a lack of continuity between the events as they see them unfold. Researchers believe that as they are witnessing these phenomena, that they are discrete, non-related phenomenon. Let's go into some of these. Let's look at some of this phenomenon as we delve into this information. And begin with the sun. Our sun, the radiant ball of light that we call our sun, is undergoing a tremendous change that began in the mid to late 1980s. What we began to see was an increased number of solar flares, solar prominences, tremendous X-ray bursts, solar flares that traveled across 93 million miles of space and actually lapped against the atmosphere of the Earth, interrupting our magnetic fields and playing havoc with our, wreaking havoc with our weather patterns. Well, in 1994, our scientists, American scientists, built a craft, the Ulysses probe. And we sent that craft to the sun to investigate further, to see what's really happening here on the sun. The first thing that they did was they traveled to the south pole of the sun to measure the magnetic fields. Now, we've measured these magnetic fields from the Earth in the past, and we've always believed that the sun, in fact, has a polarity in the magnetic field. And what we discovered in late December of 1994 was that as the Ulysses craft began measuring the polarity of the south pole of the sun, the readings were much lower than had been expected. The scientists said, well, that's interesting. Let's go to the equator and see what's happening at the equator. And it took a few more months, and by May of 1995, the Ulysses craft was at the equator of the sun, and again took readings, and to the surprise of our researchers, they discovered that the readings were very low and very similar to the readings that they had taken at the South Pole. So they said, well, let's go to the North Pole and see what's happening. So the Ulysses craft then traveled to the North Pole, we consider to be the North Pole of the sun. And what they discovered was this, that the readings from the North Pole, the South Pole, and the equator were very, very similar. There was not much differentiation between North and South Pole. And what scientists are actually saying now is that the sun has lost its polarity. The sun has lost the magnetic fields, the polarity of those magnetic fields, and has moved to what is called a steady state magnetic field. And that field is decreasing rapidly. Now, that will be important in just a moment. So I'll ask you to remember, to hold this thought, that the sun is losing magnetics losing its intensity of magnetics very quickly. And we'll come back to that in just a few minutes. Jupiter, a beautiful planet. I love to see these images, these computer-enhanced images taken from several different craft. The storm, this red eye that we see on Jupiter, this storm, apparently unlike any storm we've ever seen on Earth, because this storm was first recorded over 3,000 years ago by Chinese astronomers. And it has been continuously raging in the atmosphere of Jupiter for approximately 3,000 years. Well, as you can see, this storm, the giant red eye in this storm, has a rotational component. You can see that there's a feel of a rotation on that component, or a rotational component on this storm. For over 3,000 years, astronomers have seen that rotation in a very specific direction. Something interesting happened in 1986, 1987, synchronistically perhaps, just about the same time that the sun began going through its changes with the increase in the solar flares and the X-ray bursts. This giant storm began to rotate in the opposite direction and continues to do so today. What would cause a rotation, a shift in an atmospheric phenomenon that has been constant for at least 3,000 years? What would cause that? Well, again, in 1994, not long after the Ulysses craft measured the magnetic fields of the sun, you and I witnessed an outrageous phenomenon by any standards on the giant of Jupiter, as we saw through our live cameras a single fragment of something. And right now, we're not even sure what that something was. Some people believe it may have been a comet. Some believe it may have been an asteroid of some kind. A single body moving quickly toward this giant. And within a few days of impact, that single fragment breaking into 21 separate fragments, and those 21 fragments impacting the surface, the gaseous atmosphere in the surface of the Jovian atmosphere. We saw that. We witnessed this rare event live in real time. Scientists speculated that this phenomenon would affect Earth in several ways. They speculated that, first of all, that the water vapor in Earth's atmosphere would be affected, and that it would rearrange that water vapor, shifting the weather patterns on the Earth. And that's precisely what happened. We've seen that. We're still seeing the effects from that. Scientists also speculated that the magnetic fields of the Earth may, in fact, be impacted by the shock waves. Every time one of these fragments struck the Jovian atmosphere, a shock wave traveled across interstellar space, essentially striking Earth each time one of these fragments struck Jupiter. 21 fragments struck Jupiter. Earth was hit 21 times by 21 wave fronts within rapid succession. The magnetic fields of the Earth were indeed impacted. And you'll see in just a few minutes why that's important, why you care, what these phenomena mean to you, to your emotional state of being, to your feeling world, to the relationships, the interpersonal relationships, to the genetic makeup of your being. As